All right, if everybody wants to have a seat, we're going to get started. Welcome, everyone, to Bolton Valley Resort up here in beautiful Bolton, Vermont. We're really excited to have you. I'm Christine McGowan. I'm with the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund. And this is our 5th year of hosting the Vermont Forest Industry Summit. And we're thrilled to be here at Bolton. It's a beautiful location to have a summit focused on forest products and the forest economy. So, and I think, knock on wood, the weather is going to hold out for us. So we have a lot in store for you today, so really, really excited. So thank you all for coming. Today is about innovation in the forest economy. That is the theme of this event, and I think what you'll find in the program are sessions and topic ideas that really are about exploring new ideas, trying to think about what the future holds for this industry, what are some of the new and interesting technologies and innovations that are coming down the pike and that are relevant to our forest economy here in Vermont and in our region. So really excited for the program. That's in your name badge with the program in it. So before we get started, just want to say a huge thank you to those who are supporting the summit. Nothing like this can happen without a lot of support, and so I just want to say a big thank you to our summit sponsors. So we've got VEDA, Vermont Economic Development Authority, and they have a table here as well, and if you didn't know, they have a new loan product available, so please go check them out today and say thank you because they are one of our sponsors today. The Vermont Woodworks Council is also a sponsor, and they also have a table here today. They're embarking on a really interesting workforce development project for the Woodworks Council, so please do go visit with them. And Farm Credit East, also hopefully folks in this room are familiar with Farm Credit East, but again, if you are in need of some financial support, visit with them, they are a supporter. And then also there are some funders who have been supporting this summit and really the program for several years, and we really couldn't do an event like this without them. And first and foremost, the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. This is really a collaboration between the Agency of Agriculture, the Department of Forest, Parks and Recreation, and the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And all three of those agencies working together to support our working lands. And so really, they have been, right from the get-go, supportive of this initiative to bring everyone together. So really want to say a huge thank you to them. We're also really, I feel really thankful that a big supporter of the work here in our region, the Northern Border Regional Commission. They are a funder. They have a forest economy program that funds a lot of different initiatives. And so throughout the years, the work that has helped bring this summit together has been supported by NBRC. I know a couple of staffers from NBRC are here, so please say hello to them. And then in the last year, we've been involved in a planning grant that is through the National Science Foundation. It's an Innovation Engines planning grant, and so thanks to our partners in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont, there's a small coalition of us putting together what we hope will be a bigger proposal through the Innovation Engines program at NSF, and so the Northern Forest Center is helping to coordinate that, and our partners are here, and so that planning grant is also helping to make an event like this possible. So just want to say thank you to all of these supporters of the event and really of this industry. So again, this is all about new ideas, and so I'm super excited for the panel that we have assembled here and our keynote speaker. Before I get to that, just a couple of quick logistics. If you need to use the bathroom, they are back behind here, so please do that. We do have our exhibitors along this side wall, so during breaks, during lunch, please go visit them. They're here because they want to support you, so go say hello to them. And if you are a logger or a forester seeking continuing ed credits, there are sign-up sheets here in the front, and at lunch for foresters needing their SAF certificate, you can get those after lunch. So see Esther at the table, and then if you forget, we will bring some over to the happy hour at the end of the day. So we'll be going back and forth between this building and the Timberline Lodge over across the road. It's just about a 5-minute walk. So anyway, I think with that, I am going to introduce my colleague Janice St. with the Flexible Capital Fund. She has been a real supporter of this industry through the work she does with the Flexible Capital Fund, which, as its name suggests, offers flexible capital to businesses and startups in the working lands arena and others. So she is going to lead us in our conversation today with Tanbark. So I'm going to turn things over to Janice to get us kicked off.
Great, thanks so much. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Well, first of all, again, I'm Janice St. I'm president of the Flexible Capital Fund. And I wanted to welcome everybody to Bolton Valley Resort. This is one of the few independent four-season resorts left in Vermont. And let's give a shout out because it's such a beautiful venue. I also say that selfishly because we're an investor in Bolton Valley, so just wanted to put it out there. The theme of this summit is innovation in the forest industry. And so I went to Wikipedia, of course, and looked up innovation, and what does that mean? Innovation can be defined as the practical implementation of ideas that result in the introduction of new goods or services or improvement in offering goods and services. So this morning, we're going to hear how one company took an existing technology that's been around for years and transformed it to address a growing market for sustainable packaging for small to medium-sized companies. Tanbark is making a product from sustainably produced biomass in the northern forest, which in turn is keeping single-use plastics out of our landfill. And even though we're attending the Vermont Forest Industry Summit, we all recognize that the forest in Vermont doesn't stop at our border. The northern forest and the supply chain that uses it spans regionally across New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, and we're all connected by the forest and the land. So it takes a village, or should I say a forest, to raise up a new company and help it grow. In this panel discussion, we wanted to offer insight into how players in the region's entrepreneurial ecosystem can work together to help a New England forest products business start and grow regardless of geographic borders. Before we launch into Tanbark's story, I wanted to give each of our panelists just a minute to introduce ourselves, just the name, organization, and your connection to Tanbark. So I'll model. I'm Janice St. president of the Flexible Capital Fund. We're an impact investment fund that provides risk capital to growing companies in the region's food system, forest products, and climate change market sectors. And we're an equity investor in Tanbark.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Ben Sturdivant. I'm with the Maine Department of Economic and Community Development, the Office of Business Development. We've worked pretty closely with Tanbark the past few years, and some of my colleagues on the left, some of our strategic partners. We're all about innovation. Maine's obviously a heavily forested state, and a lot of our heritage industries have to do with forest products, and we're just really excited about what Tanbark and other innovative bioproducts companies are doing in our state. So with that, I'll...
Good morning, everyone. My name is Nina Scheppers, and I'm a principal with Maine Venture Fund. We are a state-sponsored venture capital firm that invests in high-growth and innovative businesses in the state of Maine to drive economic development. I specifically focus on the heritage industries in our state. We affectionately call that forestry, farming, and fishing, and food sometimes. And so I've been working with Melissa for the last few years, and we're also an investor in Tanbark.
Morning, everyone. I'm Chris Wolfel. I lead entrepreneurship and venture creation at the Roux Institute of Northeastern University. The Roux Institute is a campus of Northeastern, one of the 14 around the world. We're based in Portland, Maine, focused on economic development by intersecting research, learning, and entrepreneurship support. And I've known Melissa through actually one of our incubation and founder residency programs where we bring in high growth companies from all around the world to incubate them for a year to help with their growth and then hopefully pass them on to great investors and other folks to support their growth.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Colleen Walker. I am director of the Process Development Center at the University of Maine. Our center hosts a variety of pilot scale equipment, and we work almost exclusively with industry to help industry transition to make new products. So if they're interested in launching new grades of paper or working with wood in new ways, we have the capabilities in our facility to help them do that and also wrap that a little bit of research around that as well. Introduce yourself?
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. I'm Melissa LaCasse. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Tanbark Molded Fiber Products. Thank you for having me today, and thanks to the Vermont Sustainable Jobs Fund for inviting us here today. It's very pretty here in Vermont. I grew up in the Midwest, and the thing that strikes me about Vermont is it always looks exactly like I imagined it every time I come here. Just such a pretty state. And then we're surrounded right now by a very pristine forest. So imagine you're walking through that forest and imagine it's littered with plastic, choking the life out of that ecosystem. Imagine the same scene, but you're swimming in the ocean. This is the reality we face in our future, and it's already the reality in many parts of the world. But what if I told you, and many of you probably already know this, that many of the solutions to this crisis and many of the crises affecting climate change lie in the vast potential of the forestry industry. From legacy methods to modern innovations, the forestry industry holds keys to the sustainable future, ready to be unlocked and revitalized for the modern world. So Tanbark started 3 years ago with a vision. We wanted to take a 100-year-old technology that was invented in Maine and bring it into the 21st century. We specialize in type 3 molded fiber, a material that transforms into a high-end look. It has a very fine finish, and it can have complex, rigid shapes. Just to level set, type 1 and type 2 are up here on the screen. Oh, they're not up on the screen, but type 1 and type 2 are very ubiquitous. Type 1 is like the garden pots you see at the nursery, and type 2 is 4-cup carriers or egg cartons, not as refined, and they dust. Type 3 has that nice refined look. Type 3 molded fiber is already ubiquitous as well. You see it everywhere. However, the industry is focused on commodities, especially in North America. It's 50 million parts or more of the same cup, bowl, or takeout container. The average machines that produce type 3 are large and inflexible, and the tooling costs are astronomically high. It makes it difficult for companies with lower volume orders to access the material, which has significant potential to replace thermoformed plastic. Our family company, separate from Tanbark, is called LaCasse & Weston. And LaCasse & Weston has been building the machines for the molded fiber industry for over 3 decades. A few years ago, we saw a gap in the market. Companies wanted to use type 3 molded fiber, but couldn't meet the high volume demands of the large producers. Many of them couldn't even get a return call. So we innovated. We developed smaller, more flexible production lines with much lower tooling costs, about 5 to 10% in comparison to the tooling costs on the larger machines, making type 3 accessible for companies with lower volume needs. Molding plant fiber into shapes isn't a simple process. You can't just plug in a machine and hit go. It involves a lot of legacy and tribal knowledge. So we started Tanbark. We took our knowledge and we started a separate company, and we started with 2 innovative prototype industrial lines. They were smaller, again, and lowered the tooling costs. And we did this, we started a manufacturing company and built prototype industrial machines during a supply chain crisis. That was not easy, but we did it. It took longer, it cost more, it was much harder than we could have imagined, but we made it happen. A lot of the reason we were successful is because of the support, help, and counsel of many of the people up here today, and even some people out in the audience. 3 years later, our thesis remains the same. provide companies of all sizes access to type 3 molded fiber. And I'm talking radical volume sizes, 500 pieces up to about 20 million is what we can provide. It's a material that stands to replace thermoform plastic packaging with sustainable, environmentally friendly material and do it cost effectively in a way that helps build their brand. Now, I'm not here to hound the plastic crisis or why plastic is a key driver in the climate crisis, but I'll touch on the issue. When we started Tanbark, I knew plastic wasn't a great material, but I wasn't an expert. I had to learn because I kept being asked about it. Now, I have to be careful not to sound like a conspiracy theorist with a tinfoil hat. Plastic is shockingly bad. It's horrific. It's not recyclable or easy to use, and I'm focusing on single-use plastic. Plastic has its place in many of the products we use, but single-use plastic can be fixed, and it's also one of the biggest contributors to the plastic crisis. We can't engineer our way out of the crisis. Bioplastics often are very complicated. Depending on how they're made, they can be even worse. And plastics are compromising the ocean's ability to capture and process carbon. They're filling our lakes, oceans, rivers, forests, our bodies, and the bodies of the animals in our world. It breaks down into little bits, and it's an endocrine disruptor. It's a true crisis, and we need to curtail plastic once and for all and quickly. The rest of the world is ahead of the US in regulating and getting rid of plastic, and the reckoning's coming. But plastic does a lot. The run rates on the production are to a point where I don't think they can be made faster. A common paper coffee cup, probably the one we were drinking from this morning, often has 7 different layers of petroleum in it as a coating. It's a highly engineered, highly developed material. Now I take off my tinfoil hat. Here's where our thesis evolved in a surprising way. And this thesis has broad applicability across many sectors of the forestry economy as well as many other legacy industries. Legacy technologies innovated into the future are the answer to many of the most vexing issues of the climate crisis. Ancient future technologies are a large part of the solution. So our thesis evolved to, there's a lot going on in university labs, and then you have the commodities producers. There's this gap. How do you get what's in the university lab over to the commodities producers? So we decided to develop a capability around that. Again, Type 3 was invented 100 years ago. It largely stopped innovating in the 1960s for 2 main reasons. I'm generalizing. But first, plastics began to be mass-produced, and second, PFAS, forever chemicals, were put into use, including in molded fiber, which came to rely on it. So when plastic and styrofoam came along, companies said, we have plastic and styrofoam, what do we need this for? Fast forward to present day, plastic is a crisis that needs to be stopped. But the one chemical that gave molded fiber its performance characteristics, similar to plastic, which companies and consumers have come to rely on for convenience, is on its way out to being banned, which it should be. Companies and consumers want a drop-in replacement. It doesn't exist yet. Molded fiber can and will be that replacement. But we need to reset our expectations and open ourselves up to innovation and the process of innovation. A mindset shift is in order. With regard to molded fiber, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit to catch up to in the 75-year head start in development plastic has enjoyed. We don't have 75 years. However, we do have the opportunity to learn from the development in plastics and other industries that we can work with and apply to molded fiber. As for PFAS, chemistry companies are racing to develop replacements. These replacements need testing and trialing. So Tanbark is now beginning to develop capabilities to work with companies on getting commercially scaled technologies into and onto molded fiber. We want to take what's being developed in the university labs, apply it to production equipment, and start developing repeatable, scalable processes. By the way, I've talked to many companies that interact with molded fiber all over the world. And currently, we're the only one doing this approach of packaging as an engineered system. We're looking at the process with our equipment partner. Tooling, we're working with Oak Ridge Labs through Maine. Fiber, some of the best fiber scientists in the world are showing up at our doorstep to play around with us to see what we can make out of molded fiber. It's pretty fantastic. and then the chemicals and coatings. The industry, CPGs and behemoths like Target, Walmart, and Costco, and the government need to lean into innovation. Companies need to fund development, and investment funds need to lean into ancient future technologies to solve the climate crisis and be patient. Apps are interesting and exciting, but ingenuity, manufacturing, and tried and true product and process development will lead to lasting climate solutions. Government agencies are working diligently to build funding for innovation in this space. Truly committed investment funds are gearing toward different return models, although I will say there's a lot of greenwashing in the investment community. Regulation is a tool as well, as are subsidies and tariffs. Government regulation can spur innovation and create jobs, and plastic bans are an economic opportunity for every part of the country except for the cancer alleys surrounding the petroleum plants. It's a bipartisan issue. In the Midwest, they're using miscanthus grass. In the West, it's wheatgrass. You can take plant fiber and mold it into shape. It doesn't have to be trees. But here in New England, we have the working forest. It's a great raw material. Our raw material has a negative 3% carbon usage on its way into our machines. In Europe, because of regulation, companies from Spain to Finland are building huge manufacturing plants to produce molded fiber and other forestry-based products. They're providing communities with thousands of jobs, building solutions to keep their environments healthy, and working toward eliminating plastic altogether. And a lot of them are developing their working forests to be a raw material for this. There have been efforts in the US, but it's a bit whack-a-mole. Many of us are trying to turn our theories into facts, but with limited resources. Today's panel will focus on how various funding vehicles and institutions in Maine formed an informal consortium to provide essential resources to Tanbark and other startups in Maine. We need more of that nationwide. We also need more funding and a more cohesive approach. I don't mean to sound ungrateful. We've received some great funding, but there needs to be even more to address this crisis. Molded fiber needs TAPI-like standards. We need to self-certify around compostability and recyclability because the plastics industry has made that an empty promise by controlling the certifications. The petroleum industry is, a little afraid of the electric car situation, and so they're going all in on plastics. They're not just gonna let us come in and take their market share, so we have to work in on it through a lot of different angles. Our industry's legacy commodity-driven producers and startups in this space must collaborate, and we have started to. And stakeholders need to fund critical development. We also need to tell our story, how these ancient future technologies are a significant part of solving the climate crisis. And I'm not just talking about molded fiber. A lot of the work you're all doing is legacy heritage industries, but they hold the keys to how we can bring that technology forward to help solve with some of the climate issues. The legacy industries will be the breadbasket of future innovation in this space. And a working forest, we need to sing this from the rooftops. A working forest is the best carbon capture machine in the world. This slide has a lot of statistics on it, but basically, working forest, tons of sequestration, plastic, tons of emissions. As we stand on the brink of a new era in sustainable industries, the possibilities for forestry-based solutions to transform our world are vast and already taking shape. Imagine a future where our forests lead sustainable innovation and in which forestry-based materials set the standard for forestry products. This is not a distant dream, but a tangible future within our grasp. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Melissa. That was great. It's a great story of innovation from a technology that's been around for many, many, many years. So we have on our panel a variety of resources here who helped you both start and now, as you grow, help you continue to grow and find more uses for this existing technology. We've got networkers, we've got government, we've got university research, we've got entrepreneurial ecosystem support, venture capital, impact investors. So what I'd love to do is just have each of us tell briefly about your role in supporting Tanbark as they get off the ground. And I just want to mention, one thing you didn't say was you actually you're generating revenue and you have customers. So yes, that's helpful to know.
I wasn't realized I was pitching people here. But
Well,
yeah,
no,
you're making money.
maybe just tell briefly like who your first couple of customers are, because I think that's important to understand.
Yeah, and this actually is, we haven't done any outbound selling, and we have some pretty big names in our pipeline, including a certain ice cream maker from Vermont. But we have about 20 projects in development through our conversion funnel where the companies are delivering cash, time, and resources towards developing the product. And we're working with a lot of companies, Luke's Lobster, Hannaford, which is owned by Ahold Delhaize, which is based in the Netherlands, and they know exactly what's coming in terms of the plastic regulations. And again, we have lots of medical device companies or, just really wild products you wouldn't even think of that we're trying to make out of molded fiber.
Great, thanks. I just wanted to give context so people understood kind of what you're making and the variety of uses that molded fiber can be used for. So let's start with Colleen. If you want to talk a little bit about your role, or you and your organization's role in supporting the company. When did you first meet Melissa? How did you hear about it? And then what specifically have you supported the company on?
Sure, thank you, Janice. And I can't remember when the first time, it was a couple of years ago. I can't remember how it started, but it was very timely because I work in the paper industry space. We're very cognizant of changes that are occurring with demands on products. And so we saw this developing excitement around molded fiber to transition to single-use plastics. So we actually had just received a piece of equipment from a company to start making molded fiber products at a lab scale. And I think it was very shortly after that, Melissa and Chris came up to our facility and we started talking about molded fiber. And it kind of really grew from there. It was really Tanbark was the catalyst that got us into the position where we are now, exciting our researchers, exciting other companies. So I'm kind of rambling, apologies. But I first have to acknowledge the Northern Border Regional Commission because they were a great supporter in providing funding to the University of Maine. They enabled us to purchase this original molded fiber machine so that we can help serve industry and companies like Tanbark. But we didn't know too much about molded fiber when Melissa came up, which was, we knew a lot about wood fiber, but not about making molded fiber. So it was exciting to start working with them. It kind of, like I said, catalyzed the whole revolution around molded fiber at the University of Maine. So the University of Maine now has a pretty significant reputation working in this space. Companies come in to use our equipment. We're adding more equipment because there is such a demand, as Melissa said, for moving it away from plastic to a fiber source. It also got our researchers very excited. One of the great things about University of Maine is the pilot scale equipment that we have. So when our researchers are working in the lab, it's a little easier for them to transition something to a demonstration scale to use. So when they see companies like Tanbark come in and the equipment that we have, it gets them excited about developing new applications. So we have some applications for PFAS using cellulose materials as an oil and grease barrier, which is desperately needed in that field. So we're really excited, and working so closely with Tanbark really helps us make sure that we're doing something that's industry relevant. So, and we continue, we have, our collaboration continues to grow, where we're helping one another. We can help work together to fill this need that these companies have. Everybody's knocking on the door. Everybody, even the big plastic companies out there, have launched divisions figuring out how to use forest fiber to replace their single-use plastics.
Great, thanks so much. Chris?
Had you incorporated when we met, or were you just on the brink?
Should have done homework on that.
I don't. Yeah, different name. So I have zero expertise when it comes to molded fiber, except for what Melissa tells me. But our team focuses on how do we help people with big ideas make those real. Starting a company is a very daunting task. Most serial entrepreneurs will tell you they have some sort of mental sickness if they keep doing it. And actually Melissa and I caught up the other day and she said, why didn't anyone tell me it was gonna be this hard? And we said, we did, you just didn't listen. But our whole program is built, our founder residency, about bringing companies in that are trying to create scalable jobs that create economic impact, right? Scalable companies that create economic impact. And so our program really focuses on how do you think about your go-to-market strategy, your business strategy, your scaling strategy, your capital strategy, because a lot of times, folks read a news headline of XYZ company raised $50 million, and you're like, well, why can't they just give me that money for my company? There's a whole bunch that goes on in the back end, so we focus our programs there, and also being a connectivity point. So we connect our portfolio companies with ideally investors, mentors, people to hire, and then when we don't have the expertise, also try to find other institutions that we can partner with to drive that stuff forward. So the incubation acceleration type programs, I know Joe and I had talked about one that runs here in the state in forest products. Like those programs, one of the most important things I can say to people thinking about starting new companies is cohorts matter. Because sitting across from someone doing something crazy with you at the same time is really important. So sometimes it's even just putting the room there that, our cohorts are normally between 8 and 15 companies, normally 10 per cycle. But having those folks in the same room facing the same challenges and learning from each other is really important. And I think that's a big learning that Melissa referenced in her talk is sharing ideas with one another actually will net out positive. A lot of folks, if you're scared to tell someone your idea for a new company, you've already failed. So just give up now. But if you're ready to talk about it and go forward, that's how you're going to push something forward.
Great. I think similarly, we got to know Melissa in the very early days. It truly was an idea. She showed up with these samples to a co-working space where we were working at the time and explain her idea. Like, this is what I think I want to do. This is the expertise that her partner brings to the table when it comes to machines. And she was very good at identifying what they knew, the expertise they brought to the table, and also the places where they needed help and support. And to Chris's point, some of that was through Roux' founder residency. And then we also worked really closely with Melissa to help her think through how to fundraise, right? How to bring this idea that they had into reality. I think we probably met once a week for almost 9 months, which is not quite the standard, but Melissa had a lot of questions, and we had a lot of questions for her too. And so we love to get to know entrepreneurs through our diligence process, and that's what we did. And ultimately, we then invested in their first fundraise that they were bringing together to be able to put the pilot machines and pilot facility in place. And I think that was almost 2 years ago now, getting the facility ready. And we play an ongoing role with the companies we invest in. So I now sit as an observer on Melissa's board. And so we continue to be involved and understand the progress they're making, the challenges they're facing. And ultimately, ideas like this need ongoing capital, as Melissa talked about. And so we're always thinking about, what does the company need? What are their fundraising challenges or opportunities? And how can we play a role in that as the companies continue to grow?
Thank you. So the first time I met Melissa, it's kind of an interesting story. Before I worked in state government, I worked redeveloping a former Navy base up in Maine, Brunswick Naval Air Station. And Melissa and her husband Christopher came by. They were looking for space, and the Navy left us lots of buildings. I mean, we had a big hangar that they used to work on aircraft about the size of a 737 or a C-130, just big aircraft, big overhead cranes, lots of power, really great buildings. And then, we had a lot of kind of clunker buildings too, smaller ones that were in rough shape. So they tried to explain to me what they did, their machinery, name of the company, Tanbark. I was like, that's an odd name, but anyways, so we looked at a few buildings. I was the property manager and real estate marketer for the redevelopment authority. And Christopher looked at the big cranes, and he really wanted to be in that hangar, but it was too big of a building for them. So we looked at some smaller buildings, and a really tiny building, not a whole lot bigger than this room. And I was thinking, how can I con them into taking this building?
But as it turned out, they went elsewhere, which was good for them. And then I think maybe the pandemic hit, and I hadn't heard from them for a while. I transferred to the state government, and I started hearing more and more about them. I became LinkedIn friends with Melissa. I would see the pitch videos she would post about the company, and I said, this is just amazing. And while that was happening, the state of Maine was working with her behind the scenes. DECD, my department, underneath us, we have several different offices. We've got the Office of Business Development, in which I work. We also have the Maine Office of Tourism, Maine Outdoor Recreation Office, Office of Community Development, and also the Maine International Trade Center, and another group called the Maine Technology Institute. So they're kind of a unique private partnership. They invest in early stage companies. They supply early stage capital through grants, loans. They do some bonds. They do a lot of mentorship, entrepreneurial work with entrepreneurs. And Melissa met with them. I think one of the first groups she met with, it was MTI. And so that the state, so since 2021, the state has invested about $65 million in forest product innovation. And Tanbark is among those groups, among those companies and organizations that have received funds. MTI had two programs that they used ARPA money which was funneled through the governor's Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. And two of those were MTI programs that Tanbark took advantage of. The Forest Recovery Initiative was one. They received, I think, $500,000 for that. And also the Electrical Grid Upgrade, EGUP fund, as we call it. And I think there was also some money from FAME, which is the Finance Authority of Maine, that was invested in Tanbark. And so we really, their company hits a lot of marks of what the 10-year strategic economic plan for the state is, just with the clean tech, the carbon reduction, and of course the forest products industry. And so we're really excited to be able to support them, and we just wish they continue to grow, and we're confident they will.
So I just want to acknowledge that it's hard to start a company. It's even harder to start a manufacturing business that requires a lot of upfront capital expenses. It's even harder to then capitalize it with other people's money, not just yourself. And then it's even harder to do it coming off of a pandemic. And then I'm just going to acknowledge being a woman in a male-dominated industry trying to raise capital from venture, which finances about 5% out of the 5% of money goes to venture money goes to women versus men, white men. So kudos to you, Melissa, for what you've accomplished today. So I first met Melissa through the Northern New England Women's Investors Network, which I'm on the committee for. One of their main angels, Sandra Stone, one of a number of women angels in Maine, which is amazing, had introduced me to Melissa. And what struck me was a couple of things. One was that this was taking an existing technology and re-envisioning what it could do for the marketplace. So number one, they were really addressing a huge market need. Secondly, Melissa knew her stuff. She was, like most folks here, I didn't know what molded fiber was. I had to learn all of the different terminology. But she knew her stuff, and she had a vision. She has a vision for how this can replace plastic. She's a woman in a male-dominated industry. We were excited to see the opportunity, and so we made a small investment in the company a year and a half ago. And it was our second investment in Maine. Most of our investments have traditionally been in Vermont, but we see a lot of innovation happening in Maine, and we understand that what the work that Maine companies are doing can benefit Vermont, can benefit New Hampshire, can benefit the region, because we're all in this together. So that's how we're connected, and we provide a monthly portfolio call to all of our companies, and so Melissa and her team have been able to participate periodically in those calls and share their knowledge of what's happening in the work that they're doing. So we're appreciative of that. So I think what I want to do now is I wanted to just come back to Melissa for a minute and help us understand what was one of the top 3 lessons that you've learned in this process of starting and growing the company when it comes to capital to grow a business, when it comes to how to engage and build awareness of what you're trying to accomplish with your vision.
So the top 3 are, I'd just say that one of the things, we had a lot of knowledge when we started Tanbark around how to run a small family business, and then also in profitable business, B2B sales, and we also knew a lot about molded fiber. We knew nothing about capital stack. And so we decided to do crawl, walk, run, raise a little money, and then prove out our theory into a fact, then raise more, and we're in the middle of a raise now to really pour that fuel on the fire and get going. But the top 3 lessons I would take away is, again, identify what you don't know and be okay with asking questions. And so as a background, I'm a commercial pilot, and so I had a lot of experience in a male-dominated industry. I learned through that most people are not out to get you. It's just there's a malevolent few, but they're powerful. But anyway, so just to kind of identify those and work through that, but then really lean on the people who wanted to help, could help, and ask for advice in a way that was respectful, but then also show that you're coachable. And so when I found someone who had really good advice, I took it and I acted upon it. And then also I saw that, so there's the coach, find the right people to give you advice before you really start to go out and put yourself out there to raise money. The second was to just learn as much as you can about the different investors out there. You've met one investor, I'm very lucky that Maine angels are pretty robust and networked to each other. We also have something called the Maine Seed Capital Tax Credit, which for companies like ours, if an investor invests in Tanbark, they get 40% of their investment back from the state of Maine. So it's a really powerful de-risking tool for companies and investors to just even start. So the first would be, advice. The second would be, I would say, think about the network and how people are connected, and don't just think about how great your idea is, but think about what is motivating other people and how can your project satisfy their goals. And if you don't bother them. Don't make something that isn't there, because it just wastes everybody's time and it makes you, it's not a good look, but it's also just not a great way to actually get capital. So, we got into this space where I realized Maine had this huge network of opportunity, and if we could pull the levers of each opportunity in a way where, again, we check a lot of boxes for the state of Maine. We check a lot of boxes for our partners. And if you can find collaborations and ways to work together, that's a great way to really get some energy behind your project. And the third would be, I think everybody has imposter syndrome. As a female in a manufacturing business, I just had to do a lot of work around, I don't feel like those investment people in the room are smarter than me, but I felt like I was going to be outgunned because I didn't have as much experience as them. So I found ways to both find educational opportunities, but also find people to partner with that then could provide that screen of what is the word I'm looking for, like validity. So, the Roux Institute at Northeastern University, if I'm walking into a funder and they know that I'm, partnered with the Roux, they're gonna just act a little better, maybe stand a little taller, and, be a little bit more on their toes about making sure that they're showing up in a way, because they're being kind of watched, I don't know how to say it other than that, but so the Roux and other MVF, like, they started to kind of provide just confidence that perhaps people wouldn't have had with somebody just kind of showing up and saying, hey, I got this great idea. And my gender kind of stacks people against wanting to invest in it. But that would be the top three.
Great, thank you. I'm going to open it up to the panel, and then we'll open it up to the audience for questions. But you had talked earlier about how your vision and these types of products could have a positive impact on the region. You've talked about how it's impacting Maine. But maybe expand, anybody on the panel, what do you see the impact on the region? I'm going to say New England region, that this type of product, this type, reinvigorating an existing technology could have in helping us as a region grow together and solve the climate crisis. So I'll leave it up to anybody.
I'll do a quick start and then see how they want to talk. So we're not going to just stop at our pilot facility. We're developing solutions that I don't want to then hand off to someone else. I want to be able to produce these large-scale differentiated runs for our customers. And so Tanbark already has plans for a second larger mill, and the legacy mill sites are really, really great. They have great infrastructure. We don't want the building necessarily all the time, but they have great infrastructure. They have behind-the-meter power. There's a lot about them. The rural community, we're closer to the raw material. And so our vision is that is about a 50-ton-a-day mill. We're currently in a 4-ton-a-day mill. That 50-ton-a-day mill then would become a template mill. It gets, honestly, it gets easier once you get bigger because you've proven it, so now it's just about customer, machine, go. Customer, machine, go. So you take that template mill and you can pick it up and put it in different regions of the country and in different regions of New England. So.
I have a lot to say on this topic, but I have to cage myself back in. But two things I have to say, like the future is wood. We say this a lot. And another word I'm not sure if you heard, but this word is used globally. It's called paperization. And what that means is taking plastic-made products and turning them into a wood fiber-based material. So this is a global activity that's going on. It's really, I say often, the time for fiber is right now. Any major packaging company that's exclusively has plastics, they've launched divisions, as I mentioned before, to look at forest fiber. People know it's a renewable material. They know it has a great sustainable story. So it's just so exciting that we see this growth here in Maine, but it's going to move itself around the country where there are these wood baskets. So there's so much potential, because we're so very excited for this heritage industry in Maine and the northern states. There's just a huge amount of potential here. So we can just see this growing and growing. And it's exciting because it's coming from all these other places. It's not just Mainers and Vermonters saying, yes, we have great trees and forests, we can make great products. And then the other thing to mention, it gets youth very excited. One of the things I do at the university, I give a lot of tours to high school students, and I tell this story often. Like, usually we would ask them, "What are you interested in? Forestry or chemical engineering or whatever?" They don't really put their hands up. But when I ask, "Are you interested in sustainability?" most of them put their hands up. So today's youth are interested in meaningful careers, using meaningful products. So again, I say the time for wood, this is the time, and the future is fiber. The future is wood fiber.
I think the other thing we need to think about is the regionality. And, I moved to Maine from the Boston area about 5 years ago, and one of the things I really quickly realized is there's people trying to build big Maine companies. And I said that's actually the backwards way to think of it. You want to build a big company that just happens to be based in Maine. And if you look at things like the Bay Area, like all of New England is basically the size of Silicon Valley. But we treat sometimes as 4 different regions, 8 different regions, depending how you cut it up. If we continue to think that way, that like, oh, it's only going to benefit my state or my region, we're screwed, right? So I think thinking a bit bigger on how do these collaborations happen, and you said, right, lines on a map are kind of made up lines, right? Like, I'm in one state, I'm in another state, it doesn't really matter. So how do you look at coalitions that can cross those borders, that can get to a scale that can really make impact? Because that's what's going to end up happening. More folks, more scale, and as Melissa said, when you get bigger, things get easier. And sometimes that bigger is a single entity growing, sometimes it's a coalition of people getting together. So I think that's, my view there on the regional impact is we have to kind of get out of some of the state provincialism. We all love our own states, but they're not all that different.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who focuses on the heritage industries, I think the overall messaging and sentiment can sometimes be a little depressing, right? At least in Maine, we have mills closing. It's often a story of decline, and so what I think is so visionary and so inspirational about what Tanbark and other companies who are innovating in the heritage industries are doing is that they're creating a template, a path to take the great brain, knowledge, expertise, assets that states like Vermont and Maine have in these heritage industries and apply them in a new way, right? Apply them in a way that meets new challenges, meets new needs that we have as a country, reducing plastic, et cetera. So I think the path around how to innovate in these industries is really interesting. And I think to Colleen's point, the workforce tie-ins, right? Like these are the types of jobs, right? What Melissa is creating is the type of company that people want to work for, right? It has a mission, it has a vision, it is driving sustainability. And when I think about economic development in Maine, a lot of that is retaining young people, right, and keeping them in our economy, maybe regionally, but also, right, we want them to stay in Maine. And Melissa is creating a model for how to create interesting jobs that people, right, a company that people want to work for.
It's hard to top all of that, but yeah, I think it does, like Colleen said, it comes down to the wood. A lot of these small mill towns in Maine, their livelihood depended on the forest for 100 years. So the opportunity to create these new jobs, to create a market for the wood chips that are not being used as much due to the decline in paper, that's something that I think the state is really excited to see. There's hope for these towns, I think. Growing up in a rural town outside of Augusta, Maine, I had a lot of friends who worked at the paper mill in Jay, International Paper. That closed last year. So there's opportunity to grow into that. A company like Tanbark, we'd love to see them be able to scale up to use a mill that size or a mill property that size. And as Melissa mentioned, the infrastructure is still in place. A lot of the environmental permits are all in place. You have a government, local government, state government that are very supportive and just want to see companies like Tanbark continue to grow and reuse these facilities and help revitalize our workforce in Maine, our rural workforce. So we're excited. We think they got a great future.
Great. Well, with that, I'd love to open it up to questions. Christine, do you want to pass the mic around? If folks have questions, please feel free to raise your hand, and Christine will come around.
Let's see. I'll start right here.
So somewhere I read that Maine and Vermont are the oldest states in the country in terms of demographics. What can you tell us about Maine's dealing with young people leaving, or your efforts to retain them?
Yeah, I can try to answer that. We were actually, during the pandemic, kind of turned things upside down. We traditionally, like you said, we are one of the oldest states, as is Vermont. But we saw actually, we were the 7th fastest growing state for in-migration. So we had a lot of, during the pandemic, people move from cities. They realize this is not a good place to be. I have a job I can do anywhere, so why not try to do it in a safer place in Maine where you're safer, you're less crowded. So we're trying to build on that. When we market the state, we've got new marketing material that we try to distribute. We work closely with the universities. We have free community college tuition right now. So that's something we're trying to do to attract younger workforce.
And one thing where we are coming from is companies follow jobs, or companies follow talent, talent follows companies. So if people don't feel there are opportunities for their careers, you're going to lose folks. So a lot of our strategy and the work we do at the Roux is focus on how do we help the companies that are in Maine, regardless of industry, grow? How do we attract new companies to participate in Maine, usually using talent, whether that's our students or researchers or partner research organizations. That's a reason they should put an anchor there. And I know Colleen and her team do a great job of research collaborations and pulling these companies in. And the third is really helping people start new businesses. Because if I can get someone who says, you know what, I want to start a business, I feel like I have to go to New York, San Francisco, or the Bay Area to start a company, we're going to lose that person and then every job they create. So a lot of our focus is, and the state does a lot of incredible initiatives, but I don't think a single entity cannot change those types of directives, right? Like there's even small things like I've tried to convince my younger brother to move and he's like, well, it's easy for you because, you're married with kids and this and that, and all the bars there close at 1. And I live in New York and they basically go till 4 a.m. And I was like, okay, well, I can't move that. But you're not our demographic at that point. But if you want to be in the mountains and be on the water in the same day, cool, come. So I think there's also, you need to think of why people would want to be there and celebrate those things and create and celebrate those stories. So things like Melissa's business, as it grows, having, I think of Cooper specifically, Cooper probably wouldn't still be in Maine if it wasn't for a job at Tanbark.
Between the two companies, we've got a couple boomerangers, and again, young people want to work in this space, so we have that. And
I'll just say a little bit, but I think again, the whole thing around sustainability, looking at the different options. I don't know if you've seen the University of Maine 3D printed a house with wood flour. Things like that get a lot of focus and a lot of attention. And then the university, we're starting up these Industry 4.0 programs for training and how to prepare students for the workforce of the future. So I think we're very agile in trying to develop our programming and materials to attract people to the university and to the state. So we're working very hard.
I'd just like to probe a little further on the workforce question, just to get a sense of magnitude. I mean, how many jobs are we associating with the 4-ton mill or the 50-ton mill? And what's your aspiration in terms of total job impact?
Yeah, so the 4-ton mill will provide about 35 to 40 jobs at every level of the socioeconomic scale. And the 50-ton mill will provide about 100 to 150. 3 shifts, 24/6.
So I was just going to ask, without getting into specific pricing or anything like that, do you see opportunities with these newer products to be able to provide more margin for the supply chain, like loggers and so on, or is it pretty consistent with existing low-grade markets like biomass, pulp and paper, and so on? Thanks.
Yeah, so I'm not an expert in this space, so I'll just talk to generally my impression of that. So we're finding, there's parity and then you find what customers will pay. There's a difference. And we're finding in that high volume space for Tanbark, which is about 1 million to 20 million parts, we're finding that the companies in that space are often moving over from a commodities plastic piece or a PLA lined paperboard. And we're finding that they're willing to pay about 1.5 to 1.9x. They categorically across all of the customers do not want to see a 2 in front of it. So there's some of the reasons for that is they're based in the United States, but they do business in other countries where the bans are either in effect already. Some of them are just so, they pop up and they start getting fined. Then they didn't even realize it was coming. And these are major companies with very well-paid staff. It's hard to keep up. And so there's very strict compostability standards and non-plastic standards in Europe and Australia and other parts of the world. So that's driving them to figure out how to get their products out of the plastics, and they're willing to pay a little more. We're finding we can beat pricing on the plastic has done a lot of work for us on the lower volume side. They charge a lot of money for people to order low volume orders, so we can beat pricing there. So those margins are pretty high for us, and we can pass that on as well. And then on the equipment side, we're really gonna dive into the process of how you make molded fiber, how you make fiber into shapes. And there's a lot of efficiencies that are come from that, so I do see opportunities to pass that along as well. Thank you. I should say, when we started, we're in our 40s, we have 3 children, we have a house. We took off our rose-colored glasses and we put our pulp price at the top of the market. And so we still proved we could do it with pretty high, about twice as much as what they are now.
Hey, Melissa, Rob Riley, Northern Forest Center. Question for you on the crawl, walk, run, right? So if you're willing to disclose this, you've had to capitalize, as you said, pulling in and amassing and piecing together. What does sort of that scale look like compared to what the ideal might have been on the charts that you had forecasted? Because I think that's an important delta for people to hear about, and I think that as we think about that volume issue, getting you to a larger scale is the ultimate downsale stream to Andy's question around how we actually influence the markets. So that delta, I'm sure, is a slowing effect, even though you are, as you said, crawling, walking, running. We want to have you go faster, yeah. Right?
So the question is, can you repeat the question I want to make sure I'm answering it correctly. So
yeah, it's the delta between the capital you were able to amass for your startup phase here compared to the ideal that would have maybe allowed you to get to market penetration at a better speed, if you will. Yeah, so part of the reason we needed to crawl, walk, run was because we needed to figure some stuff out first too. And so we saw a few companies raise $300 million, and they're not able to innovate or they can't pull their machines offline. They have to focus on commodities. So we weren't able to do what we wanted to do. And I don't think we would have attracted that kind of funding at the beginning because we just didn't have the credibility. So we wanted to build credibility. That delta, so I would say the whole capital stack, including we're not bankable, like banks can't loan us money, but Maine has a lot of different programs. So we just closed on $4 million in financing through a few different mechanisms in Maine, and the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities has been wonderful. We've received $2.5 billion in grants. We're about to unlock 1.3 of that. And then we've raised about $3.2 million in equity. So I would say that the delta now between, we're raising $5 to $7 million, and that'll get us very far. It'll get us through permitting on the second mill. That second mill is going to take 60 to 70 million. There's a lot, at that point, there will be a lot of opportunities for capital through either banks, bond financing, depending on what raw material we're using and how we're using it. And then the third is there are funds starting that are providing low interest debt starting at 25 million, going up to $1 billion, non-recourse financing, that are doing it in order to address the climate crisis. So they're going to invest in mills like ours. So we're starting to identify that. But the delta is about 50 to 60 million. Do you have it? I'll take it.
Thank you. Thank you, Janice and the panel, and Melissa. This is the most positive story. I'm a logger here in Vermont, and when you look out on the time-space graph, this molded fiber potential could be the most important thing that's come down our path in a century. The impact of plastics, we're all well aware what a crisis it is from a climate and environmental and health standard. So my question is, and you sort of answered that, this is, as a pilot program, it's one thing, and move up to a 50-ton mill. What if you captured, or if this molded fiber industry expanded to take 50% of the current plastics product off the market, what those impacts would be? Would that be a 10-year or a 20-year process? And the second part is, as loggers and as foresters here in Vermont and worldwide, responsible ones are the big issue of carbon, the sequestration and storage. So when your product that might have a salad or a takeout bar thing, what is the carbon pool or carbon storage end use for your molded fiber products? Do they go to a landfill? Are they compostable? Do they become part of the carbon pool at the end of their function? Thank you.
I'm glad you asked that question. So our products are highly recyclable, but they're also compostable. And so if we end up in the ocean or the forest, we eventually go away. And Tanbark, we believe, some companies aren't staying on this side of the line. We believe there's enough business for us to stay on the side of the line where we don't put enough chemistry and products into the molded fiber where it actually harms the environment. So that's that. The carbon we will break down and contribute to the carbon, just like food would or anything like that. We would become part of the soil, just like a food would compost. Where we are a great part of the carbon story is with the working forest, we're taking the byproduct. We're taking the low value trees, the stumps, the branches, and that sawmill tree is going into a carbon capture environment. So we're providing an end use so that loggers can make more, it's this positive feedback where you have more people there to harvest the trees and work the forest and work the land responsibly because there's much more variety of economic opportunity at the end of the line. So that's what I would say to that. To catch up, so you run out of capacity in the world. If you take all the easily replaced single-use plastic items, you run out of capacity of machines at 3%. So it's going to take investment on the machine and equipment side too. We're working on that with our family company. But I would say in 5 years, so 50% of plastic pollution comes from packaging. Right now, we're talking about a tariff on bagasse and bamboo. We don't want to implement any, we're talking to our delegation about it. We've asked them not to do anything until we feel like there's capacity in North America to handle what companies are then going to need because they're importing so much from China. And that's often made out of bagasse, which is a byproduct of a sugarcane project, which is monoculture. It's not great. So all that to say, I would say in 5 years we can make significant advancements. There's already drop-in replacements for a lot of what we do. And then we need about 3 to 7 years to really leapfrog on that innovation that would replace some of the harder to replace products like makeup that's held in a cream jar and screwing the lid onto the jar. That takes work on the process side, but on the tooling side. And then again, on the barrier side, you can't really make a zero draft angle yet. We're working on it. A funny story, when I was telling my husband, okay, we're going for the makeup companies, he said, we can't make that product. It's going to cost too much money to make it. And I was like, well, do you know what I spend on face cream? So after that, he got it. So anyway, I hope I answered your question. But I do think it's going to take, look, the petroleum industry is highly subsidized. So we're trying to figure out, is there a way that the forest economy can act in a way where we're trying to get some of the funding here to accelerate this transition.
I think the only thing I'd like to add to that is that it's just a lovely time because it's not all of us saying, here are trees, wood fiber is a great sustainable source. It's companies coming to look at wood as a sustainable material. So beyond packaging, companies that build buildings, that do all kinds of different things, are all looking at wood. How can I use wood and wood fiber in my materials beyond packaging? So like I said, the future is wood fiber. And I can see that the demand for these products will just increase. And it won't be like paper when we were dealing with commodities. These will be higher end products because they have the sustainability advantage.
And one exciting piece of momentum on that is most of the folks on this panel are part of a big EDA Tech Hubs initiative. So Maine was designated an EDA Tech Hub around forest bioproducts. And Melissa participated, for example, in our founder residency that's focused on underrepresented founders. So female, BIPOC, LGBTQ plus founders, regardless of industry. But this Tech Hubs grant would actually allow us to stand up a program, the exact same program for incubating high growth companies, but only in the forest bioproduct space. It would bring 50 high growth startups to the region over the next 5 years. There's a huge R&D initiative led by Colleen and her team at UMaine. And so if that comes in, that's between $50 and $75 million of federal investment in growing that ecosystem. So I think, yes, we need Melissa to grow and we need her organization to grow to have an impact, but one company can't do it. We need an ecosystem. We need more businesses in those spaces to think of the 14 or 15 other applications to solve the problem.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. My name is Dana Duran. I'm with the Professional Logging Contractors. We represent timber harvesting contractors in Maine and here in Vermont, so I'm loving the vibe. It seems like we brought half the state of Maine over here. New Hampshire evidently is the problem, but two quick questions probably for Melissa. So one, is your goal to produce your own craft pulp in the long run, or will you just buy that directly from who's already producing it? That's question one. And then question two, I know you had on your slide FSC. So why is FSC important in terms of a certification chain of custody to your product? I guess those are my two questions.
So the first answer is I don't want to start a pulp mill. But sometimes I'm afraid we're 5 years too late, 5 or 10 years too late. So I hope that the mills that still exist are still there when we really need to draw from them. So if it comes where we need to figure out how to restart an old town or restart a pulp mill, we will try. And so hopefully that doesn't come to that. So we want to buy market pulp. We buy market pulp. FSC is very important, and one of the reasons why is because many of our companies will not buy our products unless they're FSC certified. And additionally, a lot of our companies are B Corp, so that's a really important part of it as well. And then just, Tanbark, we really started the company from a genuine place of shared prosperity and from a genuine place of wanting to have good impact. We also want to make money. And so it just fits our values to only use FSC certified wood. And then last but not least, I'll just say, the B Corp certification seems to drive companies to want to behave in a way where they want that kind of, they want people paid well, treated well, and they want the products to be truly good for the planet.
Great. I think we have time for probably one more, maybe two. So I'm going to give it to Joe, and then we'll see.
Hi, everyone. Melissa, I love that idea of legacy technologies innovated into the future. That feels really resonant to our sector. And maybe primarily a question for Colleen, but others may want to speak to it as well. We'd love to hear about some of the other technologies that you're seeing in your lab that you're excited about and that you think hold potential. And sorry to ask hopefully it's a big question right at the last minute.
Yeah, you don't have enough time. The biggest one I'm most excited about, and people who know me, they've heard about cellulose nanomaterials or cellulose nanofiber. It's a highly refined cellulose. So anybody that's been in a paper mill or a pulp mill, we use mechanical refiners to refine cellulose. I often joke and say if you refine it to 11, like you go way over, you create this really unique material that's being used around the world in a whole host of applications. So it kind of really leverages the nanoscale structure that's already in the wood. So thank you for asking this question. But there's so many people are interested in this material. It can be used as an oil and grease barrier. So we have a lot of work for that. It would be coming great for molded fiber because it can replace PFAS. because of the oil and grease barrier properties. You can coat it, we have researchers that have demonstrated, researchers and companies launching where you can coat this material onto fruit and vegetables to keep it from ripening too quickly. There's a company that's going to be starting up in Maine to do that. It can go into concrete and help, which we know is a huge greenhouse gas contributor, to help some of the curing there, to displace some of those materials. I'm trying to think of the other. The most exciting one. This is so exciting. The cellulose nanomaterials, if you've seen me talk about it, has the consistency of mashed potatoes. It's 97% water, but it's the consistency of mashed potatoes. You can use it to put out fires. We have some demonstrations where we've used this. The firefighters that have used this material love it because it'll put out the fire and then you can't restart it. So to me, this is, we have research going, advancing in this area because it's 97% water. So it's really amazing if we could actually help put out our forest fires with our own wood material. And you can make this from low-grade material as well. You can make this cellulose nanofiber. It doesn't have to be high-grade bleached pulp. It can be wood chips, really anything, because you're just leveraging that cellulose that's already in the wood. I think those are just really some of the great innovations, and we love working with companies like Tanbark to take these and launch them. So you've heard me say it before, the time for wood fiber is now. Everybody's looking for sustainable solutions, and we have these fibers that can do some amazing things. So thank you for asking.
Awesome, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Let's give them a huge round of applause. All right, well, that was a great way to end because I think it is exciting, all the possibilities for wood. So with that, we are gonna take a 15-minute break. We're gonna head over to Timberline Lodge right across the road for the morning breakout sessions. There are 3 of them, so that's in your program, so pick one that you wanna go to, and they are all being recorded, so if you can't get to one, we'll be posting it later. So head over there, and then at 11:45 we will come back over here for lunch and more mingling with our exhibitors.